What information do we have about, maybe for Steve, outside of the existing trials for people substituting, or maybe this was your notion of risk mitigation, maybe by analogy with what people thought might happen with needle sharing, that if you provide needles, then people will increase their risky behaviors, and then for AJ, is there any information about that kind of pattern of reaction to available technologies among transgender individuals?
Sure. Tom, that's a great question, and it's certainly something I've meditated on as I've driven around town. And the best thing I can think of now is it's not about risk mitigation or behavior much at all. I think it's really a story of prevalence, and the idea that when black men have sex with other black men, that there, as Mario showed the slide, you have high rates of prevalence within the community. And within the group who are HIV positive, you also have people who are late to show up to care and who are viremic. So the idea that, that I don't see the risk mitigation being a part of this. I think it's really a story that's told by simple prevalence and epidemiological formulas about how virus moves through populations. That's the best I can think of at this point, and that's why I just remain committed to focusing on, chemoprophylaxis and these sorts of things that allow another way to disrupt the establishment of another infection.
I mean, I think maybe echoing what Steve said, I think it's more about the sheer prevalence of HIV and less about the behaviors. Yeah.
The question is for AJ. Thank you for your presentation. And I wondered, because I don't know the community, whether there is a community. So where is the community, and how can you sort of access and intervene at a community level if they're everywhere? I mean, you know what I mean? Is the Wellness Center an attempt to have a community?
I think, it's a really good question. I mean, I think like any grouping of people, there are communities and there are not communities. They're everywhere, as you said, and certain people, gather for different reasons. Certainly there's not just transgender social groupings, they interact with a lot of different social groupings. So I think in terms of providing the most effective services for transgender people, what's most important is that we assume that transgender people are everywhere, so that we don't just think about transgender people when we're, I don't know, in a particular neighborhood or a particular setting. That really you have to assume, and frankly you don't know, and maybe by doing that we can kind of normalize transgender existence also in ways that people can be more free to be themselves, to come out. But I think that's the trick. I think it's really not so much about knowing who they are, where they are, what they're doing, but just making it a normal part of our existence.
About the PrEP study with the black men locally, I was wondering if you could explain what made the participants high risk and how some of those characteristics may, in other populations, like in other situations, make it difficult for adherence.
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Rotrice, it's unprotected sex in the past 6 months. And we had an argument about that very question, because for 061, the way to get into the study was you had to report unprotected anal sex within the last 6 months. And what we learned from 061 was that the incidence rate was unacceptably high. And so we had, in some ways, maybe set the bar too high for people to come in. And the idea then becomes unprotected sex of any kind in the past 6 months. That if we really accept this idea that it's about numbers, and it's about prevalence, and it's about the amount of viremia that's floating among the potential sexual partners you may choose on any given night, that really figuring out whether you're a top or a bottom is not relevant. It's about the idea that you're experiencing unprotected sex, and that there is an opportunity for improving your sexual protocols in terms of safety and that sort of thing.
I'll be real quick. I just really feel compelled to give an update on the RFP and all the work that's gone into that. AJ's right. It's been a few years. So the division has completed its development of an RFP. I just want to thank Michael and Martin for all their work. So we are on the cusp of releasing an RFP that originally was designed to have us completely rethink our approach to interventions and prevention for young men of color in particular, heavy focus, and a concurrent transgender RFP sort of has been developed. And then ultimately, we took a very sort of efficient approach and have done some merging. But some of you may know that recently, in response to our division giving Reach LA a contract of about $100,000 to get young black gay men linked to care, we were sued. And in response to that lawsuit, the courts made us terminate that contract. And so, given the data that we've seen, we have felt compelled as a public health department to try to reinstitute very targeted linkage to care efforts. And so we sort of repackaged the RFP. It was delivered to me a week ago, going through the county review process at multiple levels. But I think we're going to be very close to having that RFP, and I think it's a culmination of a very strong partnership with the community, our best community thinkers, the planning groups, the earmarking of resources, and then regrettably a procurement system in government that is not, they can't move faster than we all want it to. So just wanted to give that update.
Thank you, Mario. And last question?
It's more like a comment. I was just wondering, you were talking about schools and youth and stuff, and I'm in charge of sexual health and HIV education for the school district, and a big target population for us that we prioritize is the LGBT community, especially YMSM, and we have a pilot going on in a lot of the schools right now. But you also talked about wellness centers, and we have about 60 clinics in our district, school-based clinics. Lots of lessons learned over the years around how we do that, if they're full service, not full service. Recently, the LA Trust, with our school district in parallel, have opened up 14 what we call wellness centers on our school campuses. To pick those wellness centers, we took the county data and all the information that you have today in front of you as well to see what the hotspots were in the district. Many in South LA, some outlier schools, but some East LA and what have you. So we currently have 14 brand new facilities. One's open. We have one still to open in November. Federally qualified clinics. These clinics are specifically focusing in on full service primary care, but STDs, HIV, teen pregnancy. We are working on a special YMSM pilot and bringing in training into those clinics specifically to be inclusive with intake paperwork, also with services and providers and pieces like that. These are brand new state-of-the-art facilities that are being built from scratch on these school grounds. It's a joint use agreement with the provider that sits usually halfway on the school, halfway on the community to service both the community and youth. And I'm just wondering if you have looked at that model and what they're doing to see how you could work with them, how you can see them as a model for something in the future. And by the way, our district paid for about $30+ million for that, and they just allocated another $40-some million for the next set of wellness centers being opened up.
That's great news. And no, I mean, the development of this report didn't look at that, but it's good to know, and I think it's certainly something to do going forward. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you all, and if we could thank our speakers one last time.